Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Knocked Conscious. Today I had the pleasure of speaking with Spike Cohen. He's the founder of You Are the Power. He'll also be at Freedom Fest next week, July 10th through the 13th in Las Vegas, Nevada. Log on to freedomfest.com, use code CONSCIOUS50. That's from me, Conscious50, get $50 off. Here's Spike. It was a phenomenal conversation. I hope you enjoy it. Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Knocked Conscious. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Spike Cohen. He is the founder of You Are the Power. It is an amazing organization. He's going to be at Freedom Fest. Freedom Fest is in 1 week, everybody. Come to Vegas. Use the code Conscious50, get $50 off. Go to freedomfest.com, get tickets. It's going to be a great time. I'm going to be there all week. I look forward to meeting Spike. Spike, thank you so much for joining me today. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Mark. I'm really happy to be on.
Excellent. Thank you so much for joining me. It's funny because we were scheduled about a week or two ago, and look at what's happened in a week. So let's just dive right into it, man. So I think we were scheduled on the 26th. That would have been a Wednesday, and
Yep.
Thursday was a debate. So let's just start with the debate.
Yes. That
What
was
what are your
quite a
thoughts
time.
on that beautiful
Well, I put up a lot of memes that describe my thoughts, and unfortunately, I didn't already have those prepared to put up. But I will say, it pretty much went. I was actually surprised. I fully expected that the pretense around Joe Biden still being cogent and someone who was ready to be the president and still continue being president. I was pretty sure that was going to get knocked away, and that I wasn't the two things I weren't expecting was I was not expecting the media to jump in so heavily on saying he's got to go. This is terrible. He has to go because they had literally been lying about it up to that point. I mean that there was someone recently who said, the New York Times 3 days ago, and it was an article of them saying, this is, it's all these are all deep fakes, and this conspiracy theory that Joe Biden isn't coherent or whatever. And then
it
the New
was
York
cheap
Times
fake.
now, yeah, cheap
Remember, it's
fakes.
called a cheap fake. It's like
Yes, the
let's
cheap
let's like
fakes.
rejudge the words, right? It's like, oh, let's use it out of context. Just say out of context then if you really want.
Yes,
But cheap fake, you got to come up with these
missing
cheap words. But good.
missing context. Now the missing context is from Joe, but they're correct. It's missing context. But then to go from that to he has to go. This is terrible. In retrospect, I probably shouldn't have been surprised. I have a feeling that that's actually why the Democrats were wanting the first debate to be in June, because now this gives them time to try to kind of push him off before the convention, which, by the way, is pretty anti-democratic. They could have done this a year ago, but instead they waited for the Democrats of all 50 states to weigh in on who they would like to be their nominee. He won it handily, although they certainly did what they could to try to keep the other candidates from getting any real attention. But they had a chance to vote for who they did want. They weren't really given that chance, and now they're doing that. So that was the first thing that surprised me, that they jumped in so heavily. The other
Yeah.
thing was
To
I
that to
was
that point, if I
surprised.
may, if
Yeah,
I
yeah.
may, I think they were given the green light to do so, right? I
Oh,
think they've been
absolutely.
holding
Yeah, yeah,
on.
yeah.
So like, because once again, you and I aren't. We look behind the veil, right? We have to look behind the curtain because that's
Yep.
where the stuff happens. The stuff doesn't happen. It's the shadow in the cave, right? It's
This was
all
not
behind
spontaneous.
the
Yep.
scene.
Yep.
So watching Joe Scarborough literally 2 weeks ago or whatever, going, Joe Biden is the sharpest man I've ever seen. He's sharper. And then the next
Sharper now than
morning,
ever
just
before. Yeah.
I have not. I mean, they had to administer some kind of emergency help assistance because he broke his neck just doing that
Yep.
180. I mean, it is unbelievable. So watching that is really unfortunate. Now, I will admit some of the strategy is good. Like Joe's my friend. I'm hurting for him. He's got to go. Totally different message, and he's totally perfect. And then all of a sudden, he's not.
He's my dear deepest friend. I talk with him all the time, and I didn't realize until watching a televised debate that everyone else watched that something was wrong. Like
He's
it's
been sharp
they were
behind the
in
curtain.
on it.
Yeah, sharp behind closed doors.
It's obviously, yeah, behind closed doors he's great. You put that camera on him, and it's I had no idea he'd crumble like that under pressure. He just must not be used to it. So that was the first thing I was surprised that they'd make such a fast U-turn and basically destroy their own talking points from like 4 hours ago.
Yeah, and I'm
I
shocked
thought
it was the same night. I'm shocked they didn't give it the
that's what I
night.
mean. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, they
they
didn't
literally
even
were like, "Okay, everybody go." And it
you know,
was
you've watched how, like, with the COVID stuff, they've had to have this long arch between it's racist to even suggest that COVID didn't come from eating bats, to well, there's actually a pretty good, reason to think that this might have been a lab leak. This was an arch over a period of years. Now they don't have that long, but they literally just it was like, oh wow, wow, he just did that. Joe, it's too he's a dear friend of mine, and I just realized in this moment that he's actually senile. But the other thing that surprised me was how um, message disciplined and restrained Trump was. That was Trump at about his best. And to be clear, I think just about, if just about anyone else that was running, if Chase or RFK or any of them had been on the stage, I think that, they had probably would have definitely had the edge on the debate. This was Trump at his best, but it was Trump at his best. And he really was it was far more restrained than I was expecting. But I think he realized that. I think he's looking and he's seeing this guy's crumbling, and it's like, well, you don't yell at him, you don't call him names, you just let him crumble, and then go back to what you were saying. And I think the one time when he said something along the lines of, "I have no idea what he just said," and I don't think he knew what he said. That was actually like, yeah, no, that was good. Like if he had kept doing that over and over again, it reaches a point where it's like, hey, you're beating up an old man.
one
But
time.
I think like,
One
yeah,
time
he
is
did it
fine.
one
Yeah.
time, and it was like, yeah, no, and everyone agreed. It was like, yes, I also wasn't sure what he said, and yes, I'm also not sure that he knows what was said. So he was speaking for all of us there. So I was surprised by that. That doesn't change my position on Trump or on Biden. I mean, that none of that changes that Donald Trump, as of right now, still has the single term debt record, or that he has still signed the largest spending bill ever, or that he basically let Anthony Fauci run the country for the better part of a year, or any of that. But in terms of that debate, you figure the people that aren't looking behind the veil, as you put it, and they're waking up to not necessarily following politics that closely. This is their first time tuning in, and they go, wow, he's gotten way worse in the last 4 years. Can we trust him to have the nuclear codes and all of that stuff? I think it went really poorly for Biden, and I think now you're watching the entire media apparatus and the administrative state and the everything that makes up the power structure in DC, realizing Joe can't be our nominee, or we're certainly going to lose. So it's very entertaining to watch. As someone who doesn't care which one of them wins, it is very
I know.
entertaining to watch.
I'm in your boat too. Well, that's what's funny is I look at what a difference 4 years makes. It's or I'm looking at 2020, and when I was talking to buddies, they're like, Joe's gonna calm down. Joe's gonna calm down the country. Biden's or Trump's
Yeah,
this firecracker. He's uncontrollable, blah, blah, blah. And you're like, he's showing signs of dementia. He's showing them
like
already.
obvious
I
ones.
can
Yeah,
show you where these places are happening. Let me
yeah,
show you just a handful. I'm not telling you to vote an ideology here. I'm talking about this person who's who had a stroke also already.
yeah,
Like it's not like the person's not devoid of cardiovascular and like neurological challenges in his past.
yeah,
So
yeah,
and just hearing that here, obviously they're watching the corporate media, we call it, right? And they're just like, no, it's not happening. And then all of a sudden, like you watch this debate, and I want to go back to my friend and be like, but you have to come with grace because you're like, I understand that they lied to you. They manipulated
yeah.
what you saw. Can
Right.
we can we now understand that it's not you versus me? Can we understand it's you and me versus them and they're
Yeah,
they're
yeah,
they're lying to us? And maybe
yeah,
if someone shares like a little different information that you're more open to it. Not that you have to agree with it, whatever, but just to be more open. And I find that you have a really good way of sharing that kind of message with people.
yeah,
And that's something
yeah.
I'm trying to share, is the carrot method, but it's like not carrot. I mean, it's like different. It's like between the carrot and the stick.
I try as much to there's a fine line between doing the endless both sidesism, because that can backfire too. If anytime you approach something, you go, well, this is true, but this is also true. obviously you have to do that at times to have the balance there. But if you now just look like the guy who's always trying to take the center position, that can actually backfire both ways. So you can get
Yeah.
backfired on from both sides. But there has to be a balance between making sure you're not doing, because there are sometimes that it's just one side is wrong and the other side is right on that. But on this stuff, it's been relatively easy, like with this presidential immunity stuff. And I know I'm probably skipping ahead, but on this
No, let's go.
presidential
Hey,
immunity
no,
stuff,
that's a perfect juxtaposition. We'll go into that. So
yeah, let's go.
basically,
We'll
what's
go into
great is
it.
this last week we had a bunch of different arguments or different opinions come out. Let's
Yes.
start with the opinion of the Trump immunity. Please share if you could share a little bit about the core, because you probably have a little deeper understanding than most about what it is and the implications that it has.
Yeah, for the past several decades, I think come close to a century now, the Supreme Courts, various Supreme Courts in different cases have taken the wording from the Constitution that says Congress has immunity, absolute immunity, and have basically taken that to say, well, that obviously extends to the president. Congress can't do their jobs in order, and they've used that in other things as well. So, like it says that there are parts of it where it will say Congress cannot do such and such. And they'll say, well, that also obviously means the president cannot do such and such. They're saying the government cannot do this. And so they're saying the president has immunity from official acts, not from unofficial acts, but from actual official acts he's taken as president. And this has been argued many times. A more recent example was Barack Obama, when he ordered the killing of Anwar al-Awlaki and his family, even though
Right.
members of his family, including I believe Anwar as well, were American citizens, and none of them had ever been charged with a crime. They just kind of were pretty sure that he was a terrorist, but they didn't have enough proof to charge him. But they were saying, "Oh well, we have enough proof to kill him." Um, he claimed presidential immunity. Now that never actually made it to the Supreme Court because they said that al-Awlaki's family didn't have standing because they weren't American citizens, which is kind of crazy. But
Yeah.
they almost certainly would have said, yes, he has presidential authority to do that, that he has immunity from that. He has the authority to make that decision in wartime. And so this is nothing
Now
new.
that's the question. The wartime, since Congress didn't enact it didn't
we,
actually.
we are
What are we
always in a
talking, right?
perpetual state of war, not
Right.
war. And
Right. That's true.
we've heard this many times. I mean, how many times have we heard multiple government officials both say we are at war and then say, well, we're not at war, and so I mean, or we're in a conflict or whatever. But no, it's almost certain that the Supreme Court would have just deferred to immunity. They anytime, all they have to do is say, yeah, that
Absolutely.
looks
Yeah.
like it
Yeah.
was an official act. And so they basically just reaffirmed that with this, and they remanded it to the lower courts to determine if any of the things that Trump's being accused of are unofficial. And if they are, well, then he doesn't have immunity for that. Now, I'm interested to see the
So
people that are
is it kind of a
reacting.
kick the can down the road? I mean, it is smart. It is the correct decision, correct? I mean, it's the correct decision, right? In your
It's
opinion?
it's so I'm an anarchist. In order for
Right.
government to function, government being a violent monopoly, if the members of that government were not immune for the real harms that they cause in carrying out their legal and official duties, then government couldn't function. That's the only entity we allowed to do that, except for Big Pharma. That's the only entity we allowed to do that, to say, oh, yeah, you can't be held liable because you wouldn't be able to function because you're kind of like a murder machine. That's one of the arguments I make for why government is inherently an act of aggression and is an illegitimate organization. It is a, as I like to say, it's a protection racket with a flag and a theme song. And so it needs that immunity, or else it would crumble like every other criminal organization, every other
Right.
violent
Yeah, I mean, it's the
sociopathic
only difference between
organization.
that and the Sopranos, right? Is just that they have that ability to do
They
that.
have that immunity. Yeah. So the
Yeah.
Sopranos or the the Gotti
No
family or
petition.
whatever, they can go until they get enough evidence against them that they end up in prison, or they get whacked by one of the competing families. But the reality is this, in the position the court is in, that is the decision that they had to make. Now, in retrospect, I probably should be glad that people are looking at this and going, well, this means the president could kill people. Well, yeah, that's yeah, and they
Yeah.
have, and they do say that they have immunity for killing people. And so I encourage people, if you're angry about this, read No Treason by Lysander Spooner and start going down that pipeline, because the reality is this is nothing new. The court was simply exercising or reaffirming what has always been the case. You mentioned them kicking the can down the road. That's kind of what the higher court's supposed to do. They're supposed to,
It is.
whenever possible,
Yeah.
remand it back down to the lower courts, but just make, if they have to make any kind of decision at the top, as limited of one as possible. They're not supposed to legislate, and they're also not supposed to grab cases from the lower courts. They're supposed to really go, okay, here's our opinion on this one question. Now take care of the rest of this. So even in that, they did that right. But what I will say is, if this, if you walk away from this rightly horrified that the president can make these heinous acts, and if they're official and legal acts, then there's nothing that can be done to them, then I encourage you to look into the reality of what any form of government is, including this one.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for sharing on that one. So I've got another one. We'll go back a little bit to the bump stock one, because that's always a fun one. I love how the bump stock made a semi-automatic into a machine gun all of a sudden. So could you do me a small favor? Can we dissect what this bump stock piece is? Like, let's define these pieces for people who don't understand exactly what this ruling is, if you could. Because I do have a follow-up question to that, because I was actually in Vegas the day of the shooting.
Oh,
I
wow.
was in Vegas the day of the shooting and the day that they shut down for COVID. And it's just the weirdest things. I happen to be in both days. So please share with me that bump stock ruling and what those implications are.
Yeah. So let me first briefly explain what a bump stock is. A bump stock is essentially a piece of plastic that, when used correctly, can assist you in the act of what is called bump firing. So you don't actually need a bump stock to bump firing, to bump fire. Bump firing is basically an action where, and I've tried doing it and I can't, so I'm probably not even going to explain it that well. But basically, if you're able to hold your finger and your arm rigid in such a way that when you fire the gun, it recoils back and forth, and your arm and hand stay in the right position, and it pulls the trigger again, you can kind of pull pull the trigger once, and if you do it well enough, you can let off a few shots pretty quickly. The aim is going to be terrible, because the way that you typically have to hold it is not good for actual aiming. But if you're having fun at a range or something like that, then you can, shoot, maybe let off a few rounds. My friend Reed Coverdale, he has a video where he bump fires a M1 Garand. And he goes, look, it's just a regular,
Nice.
And he goes, we need to get these bump stocks off the road, off the streets, and we should be firing rifles like this. And they go, and like, I think the entire clip goes, it actually pings and the clip comes out of the Garand and everything.
Oh, wow.
So, so you can bump fire without one. This makes it easier. Now, in I want to say 2014, but it was during the Obama administration. Under the Obama administration, ironically enough, the ATF ruled that a bump stock did not turn a gun into a machine gun, and that it in and of itself was not any kind of gun. It was simply an accessory, and that it was legal. After the Vegas shooting that happened, which, by the way, I don't think that wasn't bump firing, but that's a whole other subject. But after that
I want to
happened,
talk about that for sure.
well, and you probably will know more than me, because I have intentionally not gone down that rabbit hole, because I've read the stuff and I'm like, oh no, I'm gonna have to put my tinfoil hat on for this. But it's not good. Like, just a few things, I'm like, this guy did not do this himself. But regardless, after that happened, and this is one of my concerns about Trump, because he did it with COVID too. If the media comes after Trump hard and accuses him about not caring about people and that he's not, helping the people, he tries to meet them part way or most of the
He's
way.
a little
And so
reactionary. Come on, he's not always strategy. He is very, I mean, he's populist, right? Like, he's going to do,
he wants to be
he's going
popular.
to,
Yeah.
right. Right.
And
I mean,
so,
it's seriously what it is. And look, it's funny what under Obama, really quickly, we'll go bump stock
yeah,
right there.
yeah,
The gain of function research gone, and Assange wasn't convicted. Like,
yes,
right there. And we're talking about Trump being this savior. And it's not. No one's a savior. Can we just be
no,
honest that we just have candidates that are humans, man? We got to
yes.
stop doing this whole, like, he's going to save the
He's gonna
world,
save us all. Yeah. It's foolish. And when, so, he went where they wanted him to. And so now, they did the thing where they go, we want a ban on all of these types of rifles. And so he met him part way and he started, cheerleading for red flag laws and saying, well, we're going to ban these bump stocks. They make things into machine guns. And then he even went and he said, under Obama, they allowed these machine guns and I'm not going to do it. And it's like, no, wait. So Obama's based? Like what happened here? And so he ordered the ATF.
And even funnier is that it's Trump's vaccine, nobody take. The second it's not Trump's vaccine,
oh, they
everybody
did.
takes.
Yes. Kamala Harris, I'm
they're
not taking
happy to
it.
use the machine gun rhetoric that Trump used, but they're not going to use other rhetoric that he would use,
Yes.
right? It's like, oh, yeah,
Yes,
let's pick or choose our rhetoric that fits our narrative as well, right?
Yeah. No, I remember Kamala Harris saying, I'm not going to take it because Trump said it's safe. But now everyone has to take it and go or risk losing their job because Joe Biden said, which Pfizer never said, by the way. Joe Biden and the media said, it's this will end the pandemic, and the only people getting COVID are the ones that didn't get. It's the pandemic of the unvaccinated and so forth. But yeah, so Trump, he does this bump stock ban, actually orders the ATF to reverse their previous decision and say that it is a machine gun, and the ATF goes, all right, yeah, that's fine. And so
well, it helps
that
them.
decision,
Hey, anything that helps fund so they can crack down more. Let's not kid ourselves. Like we still have Waco
they were
to talk
happy
about.
to do
It's not like we're talking about that today, but there are so many things we can go into the Oklahoma City and all the different.
They were not, their arm didn't have to get twisted too much. They were more than happy to do it. They're the ones that have been fighting it in the courts the last few years. But so with the the Cargill decision, I believe it was, the courts finally say you had no authority to make this decision. And in retrospect, it kind of went to show that like we were about to get rid of Chevron deference altogether. I know I know we're going to be talking about that next, but that
would be the last one. Yeah, the three.
That was obviously, I think that they didn't defer to the experts at the ATF. They went, this is not a machine gun. It's not, and you don't have the authority to say that this piece of plastic is a machine gun. And so, and there's been no legislation that the Congress has not banned a bump stock, and so you can't do that. And so that was a very good case. That was a good decision.
That's interesting that they like tied together a little bit. Those two tied together a little bit then, because you both have Chevron and the bump stock where you have a three-letter agency with the expert, right, making the opinion on that.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And then now Chevron takes away that power or that expert, All right. Well, it's getting a Chevron.
And there was also a decision that happened, I believe last year, and I'm forgetting its name, where they weakened Chevron deference already. So there was already this obvious, like the courts have been saying, we're going to observe the facts for ourselves and interpret the laws for ourselves because that's our job. So they were already kind of ending Chevron deference. But what this decision, the Loper Bright decision does is now not only is the court unbound to Chevron deference, they're unbinding all the courts, all the federal courts to Chevron deference. So I'll explain what Chevron deference is.
Yeah.
In 1980,
well, can we start with the case of the little guy? Can we just start with the little case of the little guy, how this even happened? From my understanding, if I may, I hope I'm not in over my head, but wasn't the initial argument where they were going to charge a fishery? They were going to have them pay the salaries of the people observing them or something?
They had been since 2013.
Right. Okay, so they had been. So this is what the fight was about, right?
Yes. So
so if you could share that, because like once again, this is like a little guy going up against like, the man, right?
Yeah. Well, this is so Loper Bright Enterprises is a family-owned fishing company, and they were being charged $700 per day by the NMFS, and I think it's the National Marine Fisheries Service, but it's the NMFS. And the thing was, they had no authorization to charge anyone anything for the monitoring services. They started doing it in 2013 because their budgets weren't as high as they wanted them to be. And so they just decided to start charging. And they saw other regulatory agencies did that. They would just start charging or start creating new regulations to raise money or changing the fee structure and a bunch of other things that they didn't have legal authorization to do. But under Chevron deference, they would say, we're the experts. This is what we need. And so you have to defer to it. And this has been going on for 40 years now. So here's what Chevron deference was. Uh, in 1981, this is a rabbit hole to go down, because this also
Yeah.
answers this whole, for all the people right now who are saying, "Oh, Chevron deference, now that they've ended this, all these, big greedy corporations can put shrapnel in our chocolate milk or whatever." Like,
Yeah, they're talking
in
about EPA.
1980,
EPA,
yeah,
EPA, EPA, EPA.
the EPA can't protect us anymore. Chevron deference actually allowed the EPA to not protect us. So in 1981, the EPA changed the Clean Air Act's definition of sources of air pollution to favor heavily polluting companies like Chevron. And the NRDC, the National Resources Defense Council, they filed a federal appeal saying they've basically changed the law. They've said that they've changed the definition of sources, and it's illegal. And the DC court, the DC Circuit Court, agreed with them and actually said, "Yeah, no, that's true." And then the Supreme Court looked at it and said, "Well, it is true that they changed it, but they're the experts, and so we have to defer to them." And that's why it's called Chevron deference, because they were deferring to the agency that was violating their own rules to favor Chevron. So it was literally, they were deferring to the big businesses that had captured these regulatory agencies. It's right there in the name. And these people are so angry, like, "Oh, Chevron." It would be like saying, "Oh, well, without, big greedy fat cat deference, who's going to protect us from the big greedy fat cats?" So for the last 40 years, since that decision in 1984, whenever any of these things came up, very often the captured regulatory agencies doing the bidding of the big companies and destroying the smaller companies with rules that they had never even been given and they made up themselves, the courts would go, "Well, you guys are the experts, so we're just going to defer to you." That ended on Friday. And we haven't even begun to see how. Oh, because the other thing that happened on Monday, we got hit with the second part of that 1-2 punch. So
The
up
6 year
until
piece, right?
the
Is
6 year
this the
piece,
6 year piece? Okay,
so
yeah.
a
So go
lot of
ahead,
people were
please.
saying, "Okay, yeah, Chevron deference is gone, but they can only go back 6 years because that's the statute of limitations, 6 years from when these laws were created." Well, with the corner post decision, the Supreme Court went, "No, it's 6 years from when you had the damages." So I'll give a little. Here's another small guy victory. Corner post was a small North Dakota truck stop, and they were facing, and I'm forgetting what it was now, some kind of regulation. Oh, it was the swipe fees. So the Federal Reserve has been setting swipe fees
It
since
was like 10
20.
cent swipe fees, wasn't it, or something? I think you talked about that one or
Yeah,
something.
it
Yeah.
was. It's I think it's 21 cents plus X percent, but they've set these very specific
Something,
swipe
yeah.
fees. And because they're not letting the market set the swipe fees are a lot higher than they are in literally any other country. Every other country, the retailers or the merchant companies have had to reduce their swipe fees to remain competitive. But here they can keep it here because the Federal Reserve is controlling it. And so this corner post, I mean, you
So
want to talk about a small business, corner post said, "Well, that's not fair." And the lower court said, "Doesn't matter if it's fair. You started in 2018. They started doing this in 2011. So the statute of limitations is over." And the Supreme Court went, No, from now on, it's from when the damages happen." So now, not only have they ended with Chevron deference, now with ending that, making it so that it's the statute of limitations is now from when the damages were done, they can go back all the way this past 40 years of Chevron deference. You can go back 100 years. You can go back 200 years. If you can show that damages are being caused by an
in the
agency
last six
decision,
years. Yeah.
yeah, to you in the last
Right.
6 years, it don't matter when that passed. And that is
That's cool.
possibly bigger than the ending of Chevron deference, because Chevron deference only goes back 40 years. This is going to go back to when the freaking Constitution was ratified. And so that is huge. And those two things together are arguably, those two things combined are arguably the biggest decision that has been made by the Supreme Court in my lifetime. It's definitely one of the biggest ones with those two combined. We are about to see, it's going to take a long time. We didn't get here in a day, and then we're not going to end it in a day. But that is going to send a ripple effect through the courts. the likes of which we have not seen. You think that Bruin had some long tails to it? This one is going to be huge, and we are going to begin to see what I think is going. This is going to be a very long, drawn out scaling back of the administrative state through a death by 1,000 lawsuits. So I'm very, very much looking forward to watching this happen.
I think it's going to be very nice. And it's interesting you mentioned that because from the lay term, we hear government. I mean, you hear most people, government's going to help, right? And what you find over as you get older and get more experience, like I'll be 50 this year. It took me
Yeah,
a long time. I was a neocon. I had a T-shirt that read, "Hey
me too.
Saddam, this goes for you." I'm not kidding. Like, I probably still have it somewhere. It's probably up in a closet somewhere. But
Yeah,
I was in. I enlisted in the military. I failed the physical and the last doctor, but I was all in,
yeah,
ready to go.
yeah,
And like Tucker, like probably like yourself, man, those lies just that last straw of lies just broke it all open for me. So I had a
yeah.
cognitive dissonance. And the last 10 years, I'm trying to figure out where I land, right? Like I'm just trying to figure out a home in some way.
Yep,
So I
yep,
come out of that and I just lost my train of thought. Oh, so we come out, we see the government. We think the government's here to help us.
yep.
And you're like, no, the people don't want a different size government. They want a different style government. That's all. The left and the right want the same. They want government. They just want it
They
differently.
want more.
It's
They
not
want
about right.
more.
And
They
more,
want
regardless, they
more
want more.
government. Yes, yes.
Absolutely. And the second they get it, they just glum on and cannot let go. And it's
Yeah,
like, have a little patience with it. You probably get more if you would have just like relaxed and like eased into it a little bit, right? So you
yeah,
see
yeah,
this, but so you hear regulations and you think, oh, the regulations are here to protect us. But you and I, over time, realize that the regulations are only done by corporations through lobbyists to keep other competition out, not
yeah.
to protect the people from the regulation. Because if that really mattered, the brakes on that train wouldn't have been from 1800. They
Well,
would have actually been more modern or whatever,
well,
in the East Palisades.
exactly. And what's nuts is that it's already baked into the rhetoric, right? So you'll hear people, not just on the left, you'll hear people on the right say this as well, where they'll say, these big fat cat corporations, they own all these agencies. Yes, and so that's correct. And then they'll go, so we need these agencies to really regulate these corporations. The agencies are run by the corporations.
Right.
You already know
Right.
that. I'm not even arguing that with you. And so if I bring that up and you say, well, yeah, but that's because they're not regulated enough. Is it? Is that what it is? Or is it that those regulations happen to benefit those big businesses? And so this is what I'm trying to explain to people is regulatory capture. Everyone should know what that means and what it indicates as well, what it implicates, the implication behind it. If you are a corporation and you find out that there is this agency or agencies who have the ability to regulate you out of business, then it is incumbent upon you to build relationships with those agencies just to survive. But what happens over time, just like anything else, you get more influence, you get more power, and then you realize I own this agency, or at the very least, I'm a sponsor of this agency. They need me. And so now, not only are you wanting to survive, but you realize instead of just trying to serve the market, serve your customers and your clients, you also, if you put a little aside to serve these people and put some investment there, you get back major returns on investment. You
Yeah.
spend
Your
millions
ROI
here
on
and get
that
billions
is
back. Oh,
sick.
yeah. Yeah.
I saw
It's
the number.
insane.
I think it was some like 6 million got the billions back. I mean, it is
Yeah.
ridiculous
Yeah.
what some of the
And
pharma
it's
stuff got.
and it's guaranteed. It's not even like, well, it depends on what the market. If you put it in, you're getting it back. And so what happens is now they own these agencies, which means that they create these massive regulations, regulatory burdens, which they can virtue signal as to, we need to be protected. We need guardrails in this industry. What they're doing is they're destroying their smaller competition by making the barrier to entry to even just be able to be compliant and legally do business in that industry so high that most people can't afford it, which of course drives up the cost for everyone, including that big company, but they can eat it. They can afford it. They're bigger. They have the revenue to be able to do that. And so they make things more expensive for everyone. And they also destroy their smaller competition, which means there's less competition, which means they can charge more anyway. But it gets even worse than that. They can, through their relationships with those regulatory agencies, they can create mandates for their goods and their services, like OSHA, like the big pharma did through OSHA, mandating
You do
the use
vaccine
of the
mandates.
jab in order. Yeah, that's one of them. And that was also one that they didn't even have to try to go and get Congress to do it. But then they can go even further. Now that they've got the experts in the agencies that they've taken over in their pockets, they and their lobbyists, who very often swap roles, go to DC and go to the state capitals, and they walk in hand and
Oh,
say,
they
"We
live
need."
there. They just
They
camp
well, yeah,
out.
they go there from their a brownstone that's 3 blocks up the road. They walk over to Capitol Hill and have dinner with their friends, the politicians that they sponsor in Congress and in the White House and state capitals across the country and in other countries as well. And they go, we need some subsidies. We need a Green New Deal. We need whatever it is. We need, bailouts. We need all of this stuff. And the politicians go, yeah, just keep funneling us that PAC money and we'll do it. And so, and this is another thing, the people, especially on the left, but even on the right as well, they'll say things like, there's way too much money in politics and, they're owning all these politicians. Those politicians need to really start regulating these corporations. They own them. That's why they own them. If there wasn't that regulatory structure, then they wouldn't give a crap about the agencies, because if the agencies were really just making sure nothing too terrible was going on, they would focus on serving you so they'd get your money. There's nothing there for them. They can't destroy their smaller competitors. They can't get subsidies and bailouts for themselves. They can't get they can't get mandates that you have to use their product or they'll ruin your life. Those agencies don't have that power to do that, so they basically leave them alone. Yes, they'll still have relationships with them and they'll try to, play on the edges as much as they can, but they're not, it won't be as incumbent upon them to capture the agencies because there's not really anything there for them. And it won't be worth the expense and the resources to try to take them over if literally all they're doing is just calling balls and strikes. So instead they'll just
Yep.
focus on serving you. And if the agencies, because again, going back to that EPA decision, if the agencies don't have the authority to just make things up, then you can actually hold them civilly accountable when they do harm you, because the agencies don't have the ability to look the other way. So Chevron, ending deference to Chevron and other major polluting companies is good for us. It is a good thing.
Right. I would agree. And it's funny because when I hear Chevron, because you hear Chevron deference and you hear these names, and to your point, once again, where I've come to is I've realized that it's all blueprint manufacturing of consent. So
Yes.
I'm looking at every media and I watch a story, I read a paper, and I'll use an example. Michael Jackson's a great example.
Okay.
In 1995, AJ Benza I think it was in New York Times, but basically Harvey Weinstein, they were about to put out an article on Harvey Weinstein in 1995. That's 20
Okay.
years before he was actually convicted or whatever, caught or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Instead, AJ Benza, and he has gone on trial to say it, and that's why Michael Jackson was not convicted of anything, by the way. And once again, I started on the other side. I'm not going to lie. I was compelled to change my mind. But
Okay.
watching the blueprint on how they laid that on him, AJ Benza gets a call to put in a Michael Jackson story that was fabricated. And that allowed 20 years of Harvey Weinstein. Just that one article replacement, just that one.
Wow.
Changed all of it. And then you look and you lay that blueprint over everything, right? So I went to Chevron deference. I started looking into it because I knew I was going to talk with you and try to catch up and keep up, right? So I see Velshi on MSNBC a year ago, and you can just tell how they talked about it, what they wanted it to be.
Yep.
Right. So like one of these things that I'm trying to do is like you talk about, I don't have that centrist mentality because I do have a side that I'm on. It's ours. Right.
Yes.
But how I can share this with people, like you explaining that regulations aren't to help you as a person, they're to keep out competition for these other companies. Google and Facebook did not want regulations in the beginning. That's how they got the first stuff that's how they got away with it in the beginning. What is it, 230, right? Or paragraph 230. So
Section
and now
230.
they want the regulation
Yep.
because that will keep other people out. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So what I love is watch. So watch this deference a year ago. Watch how the different different news organizations talk about these things, and that lets you know what side they're on because of how they talk about it. Because
Yeah.
I don't listen to the story anymore. I listen to how they spin it. Like, because it's all there, it's their narrative they're trying to tell us, right?
Yeah.
So like it
Yeah.
is just a different way of looking at those things to expose, right? To pull back some of the veil.
Well, and I'll give that's exactly what it is. And I'll give an example on the other side just to show this is not it's not a one side or the other. The side that there actually it is. There is the binary is freedom or tyranny. And so I remember when the narrative, especially when all the censorship information was coming out, but we didn't quite yet have the tie directly to government. It was obvious that it was being directed by government, but we didn't have those smoking guns. Twitter files hadn't happened,
The Twitter
Facebook
files,
files
right?
hadn't happened. Yeah, so that hadn't happened yet. And so I saw a lot of Republicans, they were starting to bang that drum and get, like you said, the manufactured consent for ending Section 230. These companies are
Yes.
acting as publishers, not as platforms. And so they should be liable for it. I said, and I would tell people, I'd say, okay, first of all, this is obviously the government is leading this. Even if Facebook and Twitter and the progressives that are running them are perfectly fine with it, this wouldn't be happening like this if the government wasn't doing it. So first of all, let's focus on what the government's doing and end that before we talk about giving government more power. Second of all, what do you think Facebook's going to look like if they can be sued for anything that happens on their site that's illegal? You won't be allowed to put up pictures of your own dog. What are we talking about? Like, you think that's going to make it freer? And to be clear,
Right.
just a little background. All Section 230 is, Section 230 simply says that a website is not in and of itself liable for something. If they are a website platform, is not liable for any criminal or civil liability for anything that someone else puts on their website. So if someone puts a bag of weed on eBay and eBay doesn't catch it fast enough, or someone puts, they'll say, a tote bag, but it doesn't, they're actually
Right.
selling weed and eBay doesn't know that.
Or
And it
even
turns out
beer
they're
and
selling
guns.
weed.
Beer and guns, they can't get through.
Any of that.
Sometimes
Yeah.
those commercials do get sneak through the
Yeah.
algorithm.
Yeah, and they can have things in place to try to stop it. But if something sneaks through, or if on Facebook someone defames someone else and then gets found in court that they were being defamatory, Facebook can't be sued for it. A social media site that didn't have Section 230 would be a social media site where you effectively, I mean, you think the controls are bad now? You'd have to prove with each thing you put up that you weren't violating any laws. It would be the level of censorship. It's unworkable. It couldn't happen. They'd
Right.
fight it in court and it couldn't happen. It would at some point
It's not
the First
scalable
Amendment
outside
would
of
come
like
in.
5 people chatting on a text.
It's
You know
literally
what I
not
mean?
scalable. Even
It's
at
just
5 people on a
unscalable.
text, it's going to be tyrannical and burdensome. It's effectively impossible. You wouldn't have social media. You wouldn't have most websites. So I was trying to explain that to people, but then I saw what happened. Then I saw that people on the left started saying it too, and saying what they would say is not we need to end Section 230, but we need to reform it. We don't need this jungle social media that's happening out there. And then you started seeing the social media heads going and the big tech heads going, yeah, we do need some guardrails here. And it's like, no, they're about to do a giant rope-a-dope, or they're going to try to do a giant rope-a-dope where they get to do stuff, but because they can afford the millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions it will cost to comply, which means that the costs are going to go up for you, more ads for you, less access for you, possible mandatory fees for you. But the smaller competitors, the Rumbles, the Odysseys, the Floats, the Gabs, the whatever, they're going to have to go away because they can't afford the barrier to entry. You will have a much less free internet. And this is why I encourage my friends on the right. Remember the lessons from the Patriot Act and the authorization of use of military force and all of the stuff that came in post 9/11 and the No Child Left Behind Act and all of those things that you were told were going to make this government be accountable to the people. No, it's not. Every time you give government a new power, even if you agree with the pretext behind why they're saying they need the new power, even if you agree that that thing they're talking about is a legitimate threat, what you are giving them is a gun with the promise that they'll never point it at you. And if you think they won't
No,
point it at
not a
you,
problem. They don't even promise that. They don't even. They
They,
don't
they,
even say anything.
you're right. Actually, you're
There's
right.
no writing about it. They don't even
They
say.
just
They say,
don't.
"Well, you couldn't use it on you. We wouldn't.
Yeah,
We wouldn't want to."
it's actually, you're right. It's not a promise. They actually just never mention the fact that they're going to immediately turn it around
It's don't
against
ask,
you.
don't tell. It's
And
don't
when you
ask,
think
don't
about
tell.
all the guns they currently, yeah, it's don't ask, don't tell. Exactly. Don't ask me if I'm going to point it at you. I'm not going to tell you if I'm going to point it at you. Hey, wait, I'm pointing it at you. Think of all the guns they already have pointed at you. Think of how the Patriot Act, which was literally written to stop the specific terrorists who were responsible for 9/11, has been used to try to go after school parents who showed up at school board meetings. And now, if you agree with what those parents were angry about, but then still want to give that government more power to deal with that, remember that that's the government that was trying to call them terrorists. How do you think they're going to use it? If
Yeah.
instead, anytime you see a threat, before you want to give government a scintilla more power, look behind it and see, how did the government make this worse? Because if you look at that thing and say, I want government to have more power, you are substantively the same as the person that looked at COVID and said, we need to listen to the experts in the government who are telling us to lock down. That may
Yeah.
not have been the thing that scared you, or you might have seen that for what it is. But if you see another threat, and it might be a legitimate threat or a legitimate bad thing that needs to be dealt with, and if you're looking at that, and instead of looking for the way that government created that or made it worse, instead you're looking at how government can protect you from it, then you're falling for the same thing that the COVIDians did.
Yeah. Exactly. It is funny because you do watch, once again, I grew up very Republican, Reagan. I mean, since
Me too.
92, I
Me
voted
too.
elephant.
Yep.
At 92, that's it. Boom, 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 all the way along. And this is my first election. I'll share with you. I had a conversation with Rechtenwald in December, and I found him to be principled. Like him, he came from a completely different ideological thing and realized
Yep.
that no vacuum nothing's perfect, so we have to let it
Yep.
all
Yep.
happen, because we just basically have to let it all happen, so we have to filter it out through humanity. I mean, that's
Yes.
basically how we got
Yep.
to figure it out. And he comes from the left and I came from the right, and it's like,
Yep.
but I find that principle. And then, if I may just pivot slightly to
Sure.
the Libertarian Convention.
Yeah.
I actually was going to run for Congress in Ruben Gallego's empty district where he's running for Senate. And I had started no political party. And the way it's in Arizona is the number of signatures I needed as an independent was 3 to 4 times what I'd need as a Democrat or Republican,
Yeah.
and about
Always.
6 times what I'd need as as a
Yeah.
libertarian.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah. Yeah.
changed political parties for a minute, talked to someone at the Libertarian Party, but then it didn't seem completely galvanized, organized. And this is 22, so it wasn't yet. You know what I mean? Kind of, again, like you had you started with Dave Smith and Clint, and everybody started really building again, but it wasn't there yet. And I'd already kind of backed out because I saw those obstacles of where I'm already going to have to sell my soul and how early in the process I'm going to have to. And it's like, I can't I am not one of those people that say I can work within the system. I either fight the system. I can't fight within the system. I'm not just one of those. I think I have to fight the
Yeah. Yeah.
system out from outside the system. And that's
Yeah.
why I'm
Yeah.
not a
Yeah.
registered libertarian anymore. I went back to no political party.
Okay.
That said, Rex sold me. I was in on Clinton Rec. If I had known about, obviously, if I'd known about you, I knew about Joe. I wasn't sold on Joe, but I obviously, if I'd listened to you, I probably would have been like, okay, cool. That I would have been compelled. Um, and that's nothing against Joe. It's just I didn't know her that well, if that makes sense,
Yeah.
and I didn't know you that well. But I talked to Rec, and then we get to Libertarian Convention, and you break it down. You vote for Angela first on Friday when you could have had a candidate. Now, it's my opinion that whole thing was orchestrated, was strategically done. Because from what I hear, everybody was saying stall, stall, stall as long as you can. I watched that live. I watched the votes 1 through 7, or 7 or 8, 7. It was 7 against Noda. And when I watched the questions that were being asked to Angela, like where the bathroom is, and all these weird questions where people were walking up to the podium, I'm like, are
Yes.
these real? And I didn't know about the shenanigans yet. You know what I mean? Like I said, I just
Yeah. Yeah.
been watching it. I see Rec round 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, boom. And now look, Chase is a workhorse. I'm not going to take anything away from his work ethic
Yep.
or Termat
Yep.
or anything else.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I'd
Yeah.
love for you to paint a little bit of shade into kind of what your thoughts on how it went and the overall kind of takeaway from it.
Yeah. So the first thing I want to say is, and this was something I planned to do no matter how the convention went. So this was all. This is not because of the outcome or anything. And Chase knew that, Rec knew that, everyone knew that. But the because of my work with You Are the Power, which is a nonpartisan nonprofit organization, and because I'm increasingly the face of that, not of any political party or campaign or anything, but I'm the face of that. I have wanted to increasingly personally get away from being involved, even personally. Obviously the nonprofit's not involved at all, but even personally being involved with supporting or endorsing or working with any campaigns, any candidates, or any political parties. I'm certainly
Absolutely.
still happy to work where we have common cause and to talk about issues, and I even will still talk about where I agree and disagree with politicians on specific things, but I'm very careful never to try to tell someone you should vote this way or I'm going to be supporting this or voting that, because I would much rather focus on the work we're doing at You Are the Power, and we can talk more about that in a bit. But
Oh, and
what
and
I
I would
will
love to
say,
talk about that. Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, no, we'll talk about that. We can talk about that next if you want. But what I will say is
Yeah.
this. First of all, the shenanigans always happen at every convention. That's baked into the cake. Whoever wants to
Come on, the
stall,
tribe of the
they're
tribalists. Are
can
you kidding me?
can
Come
we
on.
can we it's cold in here. Can we change? It's hot. Now it's hot. Like, I mean, this is always point of order. I think that we need to do this in this order. And then Angela's like, we are doing this in this order. No, I'm pretty sure they said that we're not doing that in that, or like, so when they wanted me to come up and give a speech, it took 10 minutes for them to introduce me because people kept getting up and going, hey, wait. It's hot in here. Like, it was insane. So but those shenanigans, that was on Saturday. Actually, no, that was on Sunday. But that part of the shenanigans was actually happening in Saturday. Everyone agreed, or seemed to agree, that after spending a day fighting about who was even going to be allowed to be seated as a delegate, that that we were going to pick chair first. What I was saying was, whatever you got to do to figure out who you're seating and not seating, go ahead and get that done, and then pick your candidate. Because on Friday, Bobby Kennedy is going to be here. Put our candidate, and all the media that's only going to be there for Kennedy is going to be there. And then they're going to leave.
Right.
And then all the media that's
Right.
going to come for Trump is going to be there. Have our candidate, not a straw poll winner from a debate, the actual candidate. And when Bobby and his people are up there with those rubber chickens saying to Trump, debate Bobby, go, no, debate our guy too. We just picked him. Okay?
And
Debate
not
whether.
only that, I watched Rec and Termont against Bobby. And I watched that empty debate from a couple months ago already.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
watched Bobby completely be nothing but just little talking points with zero substance behind it.
He's talking
And
points. Yeah.
I don't know Termont very well, but I can at least speak. He spoke to the things that you and I would have spoken to at least much more clearly and more eloquently than Bobby Kennedy did. It would have been beautiful to watch
Yeah.
your
Exactly.
candidate go
Yeah.
debate like Kennedy.
And so here's that opportunity one we've never had before, having all this national and international media there. And when they're saying, what do you think about Bobby Kennedy? Put your candidate there. Don't have them asking. I was being interviewed by like BBC and Reuters and all these people. Like, where is our candidate? Which we didn't have one yet. And if we had a candidate, I would have said, well, you need to be speaking with, I'm yesterday's news. I'm the 4 years ago VP candidate. You want our presidential candidate. And they wouldn't have been coming to me. They would have been coming to the candidate. They were coming to me because I was the last one to be nominated for something here, right? At the national level. So they're like, I will ask you. So it was a great and missed opportunity. But the reason that happened was because both sides agreed that the most important thing was to stop the existential threat to the party that was the other side. We have a duopoly inside of our party, but we have a duopoly in the country because we have a duopoly in any democratic system. Democracy, the democratic process of choosing people, chair, candidate, president, Senate, Congress, governor, whatever, that very process requires people to look for, because in order for, so let's say you and I are running for something, okay? And let's say that we agree on 99.99% of things, and our character, our values are 99.99% aligned. We both chose to wear black shirts for this show. We're almost, our beards are almost identical. We're
Yeah,
literally,
we're
we are
aligned.
as close to the same
I'll get my
people.
glasses. Hold on.
Yeah, get your glasses. Yeah, we are as close to the same people as possible. But if we're running for something, even if we're the best of friends, we went to each other's weddings, we built a treehouse together when we were children, but now we're running for something. And in order for me to try to say why they should vote for me instead of you, I have to focus on that 0.001% of difference between us. And so do you. And not only that, but we have to try to say that that's actually really important. It doesn't seem like it's a lot, but it's actually a really big deal. And it's why you should vote for me, Spike, instead of you, Mark, or you, Mark, instead of me, Spike, right? Now, that might start
Not
as a
only is
friendly
the one
competition.
issue a big deal, the entire election is the biggest
It's the
deal
who
ever.
you
Uh,
choose
Ever.
between us is so important. And that rhetoric necessarily has to get worse over time because you have to keep people's attention, especially if there's no real discernible difference between us. We have to offset that with theatrics. And so, but even before we get into the theatrics and all of that, we are necessitating the creation of a fault line based on our differences and encouraging people to choose one or the other side of that fault line because democracy is a conflict machine. There must be a loser. Keep in mind, I didn't say there must be a winner. There must be at least one loser. Someone has to lose.
Right.
And so if
Democracy is,
someone
was
has
it
to
the
lose,
tyranny of the majority, right?
the
Isn't
tyranny
that
of the
Ron Paul's?
majority, or even the tyranny of the loudest minority sometimes, right? Or the
Yeah,
loudest
the
plurality.
squeakiest
It's the
wheel.
tyranny of the
Let's be honest.
plurality
Culturally, the squeakiest wheels seem to have gotten
very
a hold of
often.
things culturally for sure.
Very often. And
So,
so what it,
so go ahead.
no, I and so the point is when that happens, and especially over time, the longer you have to do this before you get together, whenever you get together, before you go and fight your common cause together, someone's got to lose. Someone here has to lose, and the other side gets to win, and we get to say that we won and you lost. Over time, that creates this duopoly nature of things. It creates this you have to choose between faction A and faction B. Look at the rhetoric between the two factions in the Libertarian Party. They're almost identical to the rhetoric between the Republicans and Democrats. The people in
Yeah.
this faction say that this faction's full of a bunch of white nationalists and racists, and that's objectively false. Are there some? Sure, there's probably some over here too, but that's not what they all are. And then this
Right.
faction says that this faction is full of a bunch of woke degenerates who hate everything our country stands for and hate our culture. Well, that's objectively false. There some that would qualify? Yeah, probably on both sides again. But there's that's objectively false. But that's literally what Republicans and Democrats say from about each
Yeah.
other. Meanwhile, we look at Republicans and Democrats, and the vast majority of them look identical. Are there
Yeah.
weird, shrill people on the fringes? Yeah, absolutely. But in for the vast majority of people, that you wouldn't even know unless they told you. And so all of that to say, this is what happens. And over time, it gets worse and worse and worse. And what we're seeing in this party is identical to what we're seeing in the country. Every time this faction takes over, it's that much more visceral and angry and vengeful and vindictive. And then every time this side takes over, it's more and more terrible. And the thing is, the difference between the party and the country is you can't leave the only way you can leave the country is by moving, right? Like you can't just go, I
Yeah.
opt out of this, but you can opt out of the Libertarian Party. You can go, yeah, this
Yeah.
is too much. I can't do this. And so I think that's what's happening. And I think it's actually
Yeah.
the opposite of liberty. Liberty requires respecting people as individual human beings. The democratic process of choosing who's going to be in charge does encourages and necessitates collectivization, dehumanization to some extent, and forming these fault lines and forcing yourself to collectivize and to collectivize others is the opposite of respecting people as individual human beings. You don't even look at them as individual human beings. And eventually, you don't even look at them as people. They're abstractions. They're what you hate. There's nothing good that comes from them,
The
and there's
other.
nothing bad that comes from
Yeah.
us. They're the other. And so I
Yeah.
am increasingly not just not wanting to be involved in party politics, I'm increasingly convinced that the very electoral process itself impedes liberty and harms liberty because it forces us to do a thing that goes against the very nature of what liberty is, which is individual human respect, individual self ownership, personal autonomy, private property rights. All of those are born from individualism. And if what we're engaging in is necessitated, forced collectivism, I won't even say forced collectivism because we're choosing to do it. If it's necessitated, mandatory collectivism, how does that feed liberty? I'm not sure that it can.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I'd love to talk about that. You mentioned respect, and I watched you did a 20-minute lecture or something at Pork Fest,
At
I
Porkfest,
think it
yes.
was. Uh,
Yes.
do you have a great time there? So I hopefully
Oh,
we could
man.
you could spin us a couple yards when we meet. But so you were Pork Fest and you gave this thing about respect, and it's
Yeah.
funny because I did a podcast with a buddy of mine probably a couple 2-3 years ago, and it's not about respect in my opinion. If you could follow me here,
Sure, sure.
it's my opinion. It's courtesy, because courtesy is the base thing. And what happens is I think that as humans, we've conflated courtesy and respect, so that
Okay.
when we think we don't respect the person because we don't agree with them, we don't need to be courteous to them either. So like all of it goes
Yes.
out the window, right? Like the hand in glove. It's like, why would I hold the door for someone I don't respect? Well, no,
Yep.
you should hold the door for someone because they're behind you and that's courteous. And then
Right,
when
but
you
what?
hold the door for them and they thank you,
Yeah.
that's the closure of the contract. That's how the courtesy
Yes.
works. Anyway, go ahead.
Right. And here's why we have that courtesy. And this will help to show the definition of respect that I'm using. We do that because we respect one another as individual human beings. And I should say this:
And ourselves,
if you're saying
hopefully, right? We respect
well,
ourselves, I
and
hope.
ourselves, so it's respecting the fact that they are an individual human being. So it is not respecting that. We may not even know that person. Like I said in that speech,
Right.
the vast majority of people I had to come into relative close contact with and interact with, the tens of thousands of people that I was in near proximity to in the 3 airports I had to visit just to get to New Hampshire. Um, I will never see almost any of those people ever again. And I had no idea who they were. I might not have even really looked at them. I was near them and might have known of their presence. But I can't respect who they are, right? Like I wouldn't
Right.
even know who they are, but I respect the fact that they're individual human beings. If I'm walking and I see an ant on the floor, I don't go, oh man, I better walk this way so I don't accidentally step on it, right? I'm not going to do that with a human being because I respect that they are an individual human being. I'm not going to do a lot of different things to a human being that I wouldn't care were happening to some other creature because they are individual human beings. This is an intrinsic thing that we don't even really talk about because unless you're a sociopath or a criminal or psychopath or a politician, unless you're one of these things, then you don't even really think about it. It's and we often have a hard time explaining it. So, a lot of people say the basics of libertarianism are don't hurt people and don't take their stuff. Well, an edgy enough person could say, why? And you go, well, because it's wrong. And they go, who says it's wrong? Why is it wrong? What if I want to? And you say, well, but you shouldn't do it. Yeah, why shouldn't I? And then you might get into saying, well, I have a religious belief that you shouldn't do that, or the law. Now we're appealing to the law. The law says that you shouldn't do it, or just basic, like you said, basic courtesy says that you shouldn't do it. And they go, yeah, well, I don't agree with that. So why should I have to do that? These are the egoists talking, right? Why should I have to do that? I may choose to
Sure.
do that
Yeah.
because it's in my
I'm
best interest.
outside.
I'm
I'm
not going to
outside
do that.
your laws.
I'm
I'm
outside
all
of
my own
that.
thing.
I do what I want, and if I don't do it to you, it's because it's in my basic perceived self interest to do so. There's an argument to that. I say it's that for the vast majority of people, for virtually everyone, again, people who are not sociopaths and psychopaths and criminals, there is this basic intrinsic level of respect that each of these people are individual human beings, and it is through that respect and that intrinsic expectation of respect from others that we're able to thrive. Look at the places that are high in crime, or places that, like war zones, places where people are scared to go outside or scared to even look into the sky because they're afraid there's going to be a drone or a bomb there. They can't thrive there. They can't prosper there. They're certainly not living in harmony. And if they're able to have any kind of happiness in their lives, it's by sheer miracle and by sheer force of will to do so. The more respect we have for one another, the more respect that we can reasonably expect from other human beings in our relative proximity, the more prosperous we are, the more happy we are, the more harmonious we are. And again, this is something intrinsic that we all understand. Unfortunately, the vast majority of people have this weird set aside where we say, well, yeah, but the government can do these things. Now, the government is just a bunch of people. So, and those exact same people, and I talked about this in the speech, if a politician or a bureaucrat outside of their capacity as a government official were to do these same things as individuals, we'd have a problem with it. If let's say I'm a politician, okay? I'm a congressman, and if outside of my capacity, if I'm just walking down the street, I am a congressman, but I'm not acting in an official, as the Supreme Court just said, in an official capacity.
Official
I'm not taking
capacity.
an official action.
The wink, like
I
the finger guns and the wink. If you're
This isn't
official
official. This
capacity,
is
you know.
unofficial action. And so let's say I walk up to you with a gun and I say, give me what's in your wallet. And I might give some of it back to you if I think you deserve it, but I'm probably going to keep a good bit of it. And you know what's going to happen if you don't give it to me. You might pull out your gun and shoot me. You might knock the gun out of my hand and fight me. You might run away. You might call for help, or you might even comply. You know, if you're like, you know what, it's not worth my life. I don't have a gun on me, whatever. But you didn't do so because you thought it was a good idea, or because you said, well, you know, this is how our society runs. You're doing it because you don't want harm, right? And so if you do
Yeah.
choose to do it, or you might fight back and you don't go, wow, what I'm doing is very revolutionary. Whatever. You're defending yourself from someone who's not respecting you as an individual human being. They're imposing themselves on you because they're not seeing you as a person. I'm seeing you as something I can take money from. But if I then turn around and get back into my capacity as a congressman, and I announce that I'm entering a bill that's going to fund all of the needs that people have, or some specific need, but I'm not just giving money out to everyone. I'll give it to you if I think that you absolutely need it, based on these
I will be
arbitrary
taking it from you.
standards. I will be
I will be
taking it
taking
from
it from
you.
everyone, but
The
I'll just
taking is
decide on
happening. The taking,
the
and
taking's happening.
the implied there is that yeah, it's going to be rough for you if you don't, if you've had to deal with the IRS. They don't even have to threaten you. They send you nice pretty letters because they don't have to tell you what'll happen if you don't comply. And when that happens, even we might put that in the same category as someone robbing you, but we don't treat it the same way, right? Like, we're allowing that to
Right.
exist, right? I'm
Oh
not going
yeah,
to even get into that,
every
but
April 15th, we do say we're getting robbed. As we lick the stamp, as we lick the
ah,
envelope, as
yes,
we put it in the freaking, as
completely
we put it in the
comply.
box,
Yes.
we're getting robbed, and we still just voluntarily slip it in there, don't we? We
Yeah,
still put
but
it in.
we even acknowledge we're being robbed, but we still treat it differently. Now, we're treating it differently for the same reason that you might comply with me holding the gun to you, because we don't want the harm, right? But
Right.
most people go, well, what about the roads? This is our social contract. It's our civic
The
duty or whatever.
roads.
Yeah, my roads, whatever. And the thing is, they don't know any better. And yet, me robbing you with the gun is not nearly as harmful as me, the politician, announcing my incredible new plan that's going to cost you. That's
Because once again, you do it on
exponentially.
scale.
I'm doing
Right.
it to
You do it
everyone.
everybody.
I do it to
Right, and it's
everyone.
almost like
And
it's like
so,
the government's here to it's like to share the misery. It's not to make
yes,
anything better. It's just to spread out the misery over more people.
it
Really
is a
is
it is a
what it is.
protection racket at an impressive scale. It's literally just that. And so
Yeah.
what I try to do in my messaging and through the work that I do with You Are the Power is to pull that, as you put it, that veil back and go, these are human
Yeah.
beings that are not treating you like human beings, and misery will ensue as long as we don't expect to be respected as human beings. And the work we do at You Are the Power is to find those visceral cases where no one's going to disagree with us that this is wrong.
So if I may, now that's a great pivot to You Are the Power. I'd love for you to share. Could you share a little bit about You Are the Power? And
Yeah,
then I have actually a quick question about one of the actual things. I think it was a
sure.
Cincinnati nourishment, something for nourishment. I saw somebody
Oh, in
talking about it,
Dayton,
about
Ohio.
getting.
Yeah.
Yeah, in Dayton, Ohio it was. Okay. If you could share about a little about You Are the Power, and then I have a question about that one, and then we could continue from there.
Sure, and in a bit we can talk about that
Important
and a couple
cause.
of other
Yeah.
causes to give examples of what I'm talking about. You Are the
Absolutely.
Power is an organization where we find people that are being abused and disrespected as individual human beings by their local and state governments. We bring it to the public so that they can join us in fighting for those people to get the justice and respect that they deserve. And we keep fighting. We keep going after these public officials and demanding they do the right thing until they do the right thing. And we don't stop until we win, and we win a lot. We are having, at this point, close to a 90% success rate on the causes that we have.
That's awesome. And I'd love to talk about the nourishment thing. And the reason I say that is because I grew up in Philadelphia and I work in a catering company. And I've got weird stuff. We were like a really top tier catering company. I have a napkin from Trump's Princess Yacht when Ivanka was like 8 years old. And
Oh, wow.
my mom comes home from doing a catering job on the boat and she goes, this girl has this remote control in her bedroom and it does everything. And it had all these buttons on it. She was like, this is like the 80s, right? So like
Yeah.
that's what we grew up with. So I rubbed elbows with some interesting people, but like behind the scenes, because we worked obviously catering, right?
Yeah.
We had leftover food left and right.
Yep.
And they would not allow us to give it to, we had filet. We're talking filet, like $20, $30 a
Yep.
pound.
Yep.
We just had
Top
hundreds of
quality.
pounds of it. And they would not let you do it because it was cooked already. It had to be raw, uncooked, because of the legal claims and all the regulations. It's like you have a whole like Philadelphia has a pretty decent, you know what, anyone can be fed. There's mouths to be fed everywhere.
Yeah.
And if
Yeah.
there's that
Yeah.
much food left over, it baffled me how much we had to either, throw out and whatever. So I'd love for you to share a little bit about a story like that.
And the restaurants would be happy to give it away. I live in Myrtle Beach. We have just about as many restaurants as full-time residents here. It's not quite that, but I mean, we have hundreds
I've been
and
there. I'm familiar.
hundreds
Yeah.
of restaurant, and they have, and so many of them are buffets. They make too much food by design so that there's never anyone, that doesn't get every single thing that they wanted to get at the buffet.
There's a
They
psychology
know
to
there's
that,
going,
actually, because they don't want to have an empty bin. They actually
yeah,
overflow the bin so
yeah,
that you pick from it. Because if it's an empty
yeah.
bin, you won't pick from it.
You
It's
don't want it.
crazy.
Exactly. Yeah. No, it looks like picked over and stuff, but now if you add more, now it's not picked over. And so they know there's always going to be food left. They'd be happy to hand it to people. They would be happy to. Maybe they don't do it themselves, but some group comes around and picks it up and goes get it. They'd be happy to do that. And that food is every bit as safe as anything else. It's going to be good. They let you take it home as leftovers and leave it on your counter and eat it the following day because you forgot to put it in the fridge. That's fine. But if an hour
And
or
it's already
so
been
before,
regulated by the grading system you already had in the restaurant in the first place.
already been
So
regulated, it's already been everything, and yet if you try to give it to someone, then the health people are going to come out. And here's what it comes down to. It comes down to two things. One is they want that fee. They want you to pay some kind of fee to get the approval. Now, you already paid a fee and you already paid taxes, but they want you to pay another fee for the health board to now approve for you to give it to someone outside. The same food that was safe in here, and that you may even have a license to sell here, but now you need another license and more permissions and
give it for
permits
free.
to give it to someone over there. It's insane. So that's the first thing. But the second thing is something that's been happening more recently, and that's what happened in Dayton, Ohio. That's what happened in West Virginia. I'm forgetting the name in West Virginia. In Gastonia, North Carolina. In Columbia, South Carolina. These city governments are, because there's this homelessness crisis. And so what these city governments are doing is they're making these multi-million, sometimes tens of millions of dollars contract with charities and NGOs to come in and fix the homelessness crisis. And of course, because they want to get more of that money every year, they're not actually going to fix it. They're going to
The
actually
border
probably let
NGOs
it
are
get
a
worse.
great example of what we just found. How
Oh yeah.
the sex trafficking, the NGOs down there, all those Catholic organizations that are just funneling millions of dollars to just bring people over.
Oh,
It's
the NGOs that are
incredible.
bringing people. Yeah. An
Right, that's what I'm
NGO
talking about. It's like
is
all these
is
NGOs. The word NGO, it's like people do not know what an NGO is.
what an NGO implies is that it is a nonprofit that gets its money. Their
Non-government
only real
organization.
donor, yeah, and the reason that they're differentiating is because their funding comes from the government, but they're non-government or private
Non-government, right.
partner, private public partnership or whatever. But really, what it is it's a swindle. Not always, not always, and
No,
many
no,
of them come in
look,
with the best of intentions. But what's happening is once they start getting that money and they go, wow, we get more money every year and all we have to do is still have this problem next year. Okay. And so, but what happens is, so if I'm a politician, I need you, the taxpayer, to be cool with giving me more money or me running up a bond or taking federal money that I could be using for something else and using it for this instead. But there has to be a crisis. And if groups like Nourish Our Neighbors or Friends Feeding Friends or Be Kind, Be Great, or any of these other Faith, Hope, and Love, any of these other organizations that we've helped, if they're doing it using voluntarily raised money, they're not just feeding these people, they're helping them get back on their feet, they're helping them get clean and helping them get mental health help, and they're helping them find jobs and actually solving the homelessness crisis at its core. I lose my grift.
Yeah.
Now, again, I
Yeah.
would
How many
never.
six-figure jobs, how many six-figure salary jobs are to solve homelessness? How many have
Yep.
increased and homelessness has
Yep.
only gone in one direction? And
Yep.
that's because you got to keep your job. Just like
Yep.
when prohibition, you came out of prohibition, you had to find a new enemy and you got the reefer madness and
Yep. Yep. Yep.
you shifted from that to
Yep.
hemp and cannabis. And that's just how it is. These are the grifts of the government. And it's like, it's not to say that I don't want to help someone. Just what, you don't believe in the government because they want to help people. It's like, no, I'd like to help you as a human. I don't need the
Yep.
government as a middleman to help you as a human being.
And the government as an organization, because their funding comes through theft, not only do they not have to prove that that what they're doing is working, they actually it inverts it, it perverses it. They actually have to do the opposite. They have to show it's not working and that they need more money. And so
Right.
it creates a perverse incentive to either make problems worse, or sometimes just create problems, or just allow them to get worse. But you have to snuff out anyone who's making it better. Now, what at its core, we can look at the perverse incentive, we can look at the NGOs, we can look at all of that. But at its core, if the government, if those human beings that make up the government looked at those homeless people as human beings, individual human beings, and they saw these other human beings in these charities that were helping them get back on their feet, the only thing they could possibly think is, wow, that's great. But they don't see them as human beings. They see these people as a funding opportunity. They see these people as someone that they can grandstand on their suffering and make sure that it's permanent so they can get more money and more funding and more personnel and more power. And they look at these people as an obstacle to that. These people are going to mess my grift up. I better threaten to throw them in jail. And we've seen this over and over and over again. Now, the good news is when you bring this to the public, the vast majority of people, just about everyone, looks at it and goes, that's not right. And we go, yeah, you're right. It's not right. But we're not just here to make you mad. Here's who you contact to tell them to back off. I call it the cyberbully method. I should call it the swarm method because that sounds better than cyberbully, but it is what it is. And we say, hey, here are their email addresses. Here are their phone numbers. Here is where they're going to be having their meetings. So if they don't listen to us online by the thousands, they can listen to us in person by the hundreds. And then we keep doing it. We do it peacefully. These are human beings. We're actually trying to get them on our side, right? They're also human beings.
Right.
They're not abstractions, but we're not going to stop until they do the right thing. And we're going to apply more and more and more pressure. So that's what we're doing on that side. On that side, we're getting people the respect that they always should have gotten. On the other side, we're finding people who just want to help others and say, here's how you can help others. I'm not trying to sell you a political ideology or a philosophy. The words libertarian rarely escape my lips with any of this stuff. I'm saying here is a human being who's being disrespected, and here is a wording template you can use to contact all these officials to help me with it. Oh,
Here's
great
a way you
job
can
on that.
help. Yeah.
Here's how you can help. Oh, here's another one. Here's another one. Here's another one. And here's another one. And so we're actually bringing people in and they're becoming effective advocates for their own freedom and liberty and human respect and for those of other people. And they might still vote for AOC and Bernie Sanders and Trump and MTG and whoever else, but they're getting on our side. They're adopting our principles. And over time, that's going to work its way all through them. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe they continue to be our political opponents everywhere else, which means that the worst case scenario is that we have leveraged our political opponents to join us in doing effective activism that spreads the core libertarian. When I say libertarian, I don't mean the party. I mean small L, the
The little
philosophy of
L.
libertarianism.
Small L.
The
Yeah.
core of libertarianism, they are spreading it in their day-to-day actions and they feel empowered by it. That's what we do at You Are the Power.
That's an absolutely beautiful message. And we should close it on there because that's a perfect closure time for that. Um, and to just to put a bow on it, it's interesting because I think everyone who gets into the government, it's like it is true. The road to hell is paved with good intentions. I think most
Yeah.
people go, "There's homeless people. Oh my gosh, my heart breaks for them." And then you're
Yeah.
like, "I'm gonna do something about it." So I'm gonna go and I'm gonna get into the government. You probably don't even look at the first salary. You don't even look at. You're like, "I'm going in for the homeless problem." But then you're
Yep.
like, you
Yep.
start getting these dinners and you get into these clubs, and now you're getting this little
Yep.
status elevation. You
The
get a couple
trappings.
bumps
Yep.
here and a
Yep.
bumps there.
Yep.
Now you're captured, and it's just
Yep.
it's funny. If I may, just very quickly, is
Yep.
I think that a lot of conservatives look at the competency that creaes the power, but they don't look at the corruption that comes out of the power. And I
Yep.
think that the left looks at the power and the corruption, but they don't look at the competency that gets you to the power in the first place. Because
Yeah. No.
a lot of people don't recognize, like, competency does get you the status to a level of power. It is then that the power then corrupts. That's why those
Yep.
checks and
Yep.
balances
Yep.
need to be all the
Yep.
time.
Yep.
And if we could just all agree that competency does exist, power exists, and corruption exists, and we all agree that all three of those exist in some way, I think we could at least tackle some general issues a lot better. But to that
Yep.
end, it's like I said, the left looks at power and corruption, and the right looks at competency and power, or competency equals power in a way. They don't ever
Yeah.
really look at
Yeah.
the corruption part, because that's it's for someone else to deal with. But that's just kind of my view. And Spike, thank you so much for your time today. I'm so
Absolutely.
grateful for it. I'm so much looking forward to talking with you, and I hope we can talk a little bit when we get to Freedom Fest. Everybody, next week, Freedom Fest.
Yeah.
Get there.
Freedom
Spike.
Fest. Yeah. Freedomfest.com. And what's your code? I have a code, but I don't even remember. It's Conscious
Oh,
50.
mine's Conscious 50 for 50 off. So if you have one that's better,
I
but
think mine was, I want to say that mine, it was something 50. So it was probably the exact same. It was something 50. So just use Conscious
okay,
50.
so it'd be
Use
50. So
Conscious 50.
Conscious 50.
Yeah. Just to let people know what Freedom Fest is. So Freedom Fest is a gathering of liberty lovers of every stripe from not just around the planet, around the country, around the globe. There are going to be people from other countries there. There's a possibility that Javier Milei is going to be there. There's some they're not quite sure, but he may be there. Ice T is going to be there. Rob Schneider is going to be there. Kennedy, the host, is going to be there. There's going to be a third party presidential debate that's going to be taking place there. Robert Kiyosaki is going to be there. John Mackey, the founder of Whole Foods, is going to be there. Steve Forbes is going to be there. Maj Touré is going to be there. Mark Pulse is going to be there. Spike Cohen's going to be there. Justin Amash is going to be there. All of these people are going to be
Rep
literally like,
Massey, possibly.
what's that?
Rep Massey might be there as well. He should be moderating the debate.
Oh, Thomas Massey. Yeah. He may
And
be.
Michael Schellenberger, we talk about Twitter
Michael
files,
Schelm.
and Brett Weinstein, who I'm trying to
Yep.
get to talk with because I'm just like bombarding them, just begging
Yeah.
them for a conversation.
Del
So,
Bigtree. There are going to be so many people. It's like we could
huge.
literally go on.
Frank Holmes, the
I
first
go to
Bitcoin cryptocurrency, I think,
yeah
market.
yeah
Yeah.
Yeah. So I go to all of these. I go to a bunch of different groups and organizations. With it, there's none of them that have the sheer number of people that are going to be there. It's as I'm talking, I'm thinking of other names, but I'd literally be here all night. There's like literally, it's got to be close to 150, 200 speakers that are going to be
It
there.
is.
And the
Yeah.
crazy thing about it,
Freedomfest.com. Just literally open it up. Yeah.
go to freedomfest.com, you'll see all of them. And it's not just they're up on a stage, they're walking around. We're doing panels and going back and forth between stuff. You can easily strike up conversations with all the people that are on that list. And I mean, you can literally spend your whole time just talking to a bunch of all these liberty celebrities and just people in that orbit. Incredible event. If you can be there, freedomfest.com, use Conscious 50 to get $50 off. Absolutely incredible event. We'd love to see you there, and I look forward to seeing you there. If you want to follow what I'm doing at You Are the Power, and I just scratched the surface of what we're doing. We're reuniting parents with their children. They were wrongfully accused of abuse and railroaded through the family court system. And this is apparently a systemic problem that's, surprise, surprise, being caused by perverse incentive in how it's being funded. We're
Yeah.
reuniting
Perhaps
those
we can talk
families.
about that. I remember you mentioning that one. Perhaps we can talk about that one next time we talk as well. For
Yeah,
sure.
I'd be happy to. We can maybe do a short one at Freedom Fest about that. We are doing
Yeah.
also people that are having their homes stolen with eminent domain abuse, people that are having zoning abuse used against them, that are having their businesses taken from them, all sorts of things. We find these people and we fight until the government backs off and they get the respect that they deserve. And in doing so, we invite people to join us, not just to help that family and that family and that small business and that individual, but to join us in this movement of fighting and demanding that we be respected as individual human beings. And if you want to join us in doing that, go to youarethepower.net, become a member today. We'd love to have you do that. And if you want to follow what I'm doing, I'm easy to find on the internet. I'm everywhere. Just look for Spike Cohen. I'm very loud. If anything, when I get there, you already hear me screaming, okay, fine, Spike Cohen, but I was looking for this other thing. So it won't be hard to find me. If you go to spikecohen.com, we have a list of all the upcoming events that I'm doing, including Freedom Fest, freedomfest.com. Yeah, if you're looking for me, I'm easy to find. If you ever get lost, just go to the ATF's page on whatever social media platform you're on, and I'll almost certainly be there cyberbullying them. And thanks again for having
Excellent.
me on, man. I'm glad we were able to finally get this to work and I can come on.
I'm so grateful, and thank you for continuing to be patient with me, even though your schedule changed, because I can only imagine how crazy yours is getting. So I'm grateful because, like I said, I'm new in this space. I have a quick Freedom Fest story, if I may.
Yeah, go ahead.
2022,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
Mirage. I'm with my girl. Is it 21 or 22? I think it's
No,
22, the
22
summer.
was the Mirage.
I'm
Yeah,
with
yeah,
my
yeah.
girlfriend. We go about 5, 6 times a year. We drive up from Phoenix. So I happen to be down at Mirage. We're going to Colicchio's Heritage Steakhouse. Phenomenal prime rib, by the way. And it's now going to be the Hard Rock they're changing over. So I'm
Yep,
sitting
yep.
there, and all of a sudden I see all this signage up, and it turns out it was Freedom Fest. I'm like, Steve
Yeah.
Forbes is here. What? And all of a sudden, all these pops up, and all of a sudden, one of the things lets out, and all these people pour out. And I'm looking at my girlfriend, and I'm like all shaking, and I'm looking at her, and I don't know what to do. And she's like, "What's wrong with you?" And I'm like, "What?" And I go, no, that's it. I go, I'm coming here next time it's in Vegas. I'm coming here. And I had no idea. So fast forward obviously to now. You
Yeah.
came out of Memphis and there's Freedom Fest. I'm like, oh, Freedom Fest is in Vegas this year. I'm like, oh, they have a thing called media credentials. I'm like, I have a podcast. Let me just check. So I go to see if I could
Yeah.
get media credentials, because obviously there's a little discount, but you're obviously doing work and doing this other
Of course.
stuff, right? So I put it in, and Valerie is so kind to accept me for.
They
I'm like, oh
love
my God, really?
podcasts. They love
Yeah.
podcasts. Yeah, yeah.
So, and I get her on the podcast. So I've got a whole Freedom Fest page with about 10 or 12 people I've already spoken, with whom I've spoken already. And it's just amazing. And it's just so open. So I've invested like $3,000 in equipment and everything. I am all
Yeah.
in, and
Awesome.
I'm at the bottom of the Venn diagram trying to get to the Venn diagram to the next but I'm there. You know what I mean? I'm all in, and it's like meeting the people who are looking to do this in an open way. This is the way to do it. It's not through government and through policy. It's through
No,
community, for sure.
making
So
connections. Yeah,
thank you
yeah.
so much for sharing your time, because it's truly your gift reaching down to me. I just have to elevate so you don't have to bend down as far. That's my job, right? Is to keep elevating up the steps. So
I'm
look, we all did it. You did it too. You had a starting point
okay.
too, right?
Since we're talking about how you have to elevate just to reach my, being in my orbit, I'm going to share a story with you. Um, just to tell you how important, how big of a deal I am, and how great I am. Um, I whenever I'm up doing these like speeches and stuff like that, I've learned to always wear dress socks, and it's just a weird thing because like otherwise, you might move the wrong way and your ankles off, and you look like you're just some schmuck standing up there. So I've been told that I'm going to be speaking after Ron Paul, not before Ron Paul, after Ron Paul. Ron Paul's opening for me. It's
He's
not
setting you
structured
up.
that way.
Wow.
He's so I'm gonna be the guy after him. No pressure, of course. And so I'm thinking, wow, I'm a really big deal because Ron Paul's speaking and then I'm speaking. I'm putting my socks on, and again, it's early. It's early in the morning, getting ready, and I'm putting on the socks, and I realize that I've put on this sock and this dress sock, and then I put on the other one, and as I'm putting it on, I realize that it's not the same. Like the pattern's not the same, which means it must be inside out. So I put it the other side out, and I put it on, and then I go, wait, now the seam there is sticking out, so that must be, well, maybe this one's off wrong. And so I put the other one, and I do that, and oh, no, that seam's out too. This goes on for felt like longer, but probably just a couple minutes. And then I realized those socks weren't matched. And I went ahead and put them on, but that was a very humbling experience of remembering, like, no, schmuck, you like can't put you can't like pack your socks right. Yeah, you're not the big deal you think you are. So if you feel like you're having to elevate yourself to be in my presence or whatever, just remember, my socks may or may not match when you meet me.
If I may clarify that. Once again, that's an internal thing that I think everyone should be better to try to elevate to reach the
That's
people they're
true.
trying to
That's
reach.
fair. Yeah.
Let me put it that way. I don't mean it like in an idolization kind of way. I certainly
Okay, good.
admire what you're doing, but
Thank you.
I'm certain we could disagree on that 0.1% of things. You know what I mean?
Okay.
But my point is like it's that internal thing for me to reach up. Cause like, for example, like I'm trying to
Okay.
reach out to some people who I just missed. I had just about to have the conversation, and then these last 2 months, 3 months, they just blew up, right? And it's like
Yeah.
completely, now I have to take 3 jumps just to catch up to half of where they
Yep.
went. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's not a complaint. It's
No,
this
it's
is
the
the
work.
passion, right? This is
It's
because
the work. Yeah.
the Overton window must be moved. And I am just grateful for you to share your time. And I think because you believe in the ideas of that you're willing to share your time with anyone who's willing to speak to it. So thank you again. I'm
Thank
really
you.
grateful
I
for it.
appreciate it. Thank you, man. It was
Spike,
good to
have a
be on.
great
Thank you
night
for having me.
and stay on after this, but we'll cut it real quick. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day. Thank you for joining Knocked Conscious and Get to Freedom Fest, July 10th through the 13th. Take care, everybody. 1, 2, 3, 4. Good night, sweetheart. Well, it's time to go. Good night, sweetheart. Well, it's time to go. I hate to leave you, but I really must say, good night, sweetheart. Good night.